Good evening, everybody. Welcome to a late night edition of Oklahoma Sooners football feedback. Oklahoma wins 33-3 over Kent State. Sorry for the signage here. Um, did not get that one updated to Kent State, but Oklahoma wins the game 33-3 in a game that was, one of the more bizarre non-conference games that Oklahoma has played, in quite some time. Really just when you look at the way Oklahoma came out and played the first half, very, very lethargic, very uninterested, it seemed, in the game, particularly on the offensive side of the ball. The offensive line was very, very bad in the first half. They were a little bit better in the second half, but not nearly good as they need to be for Oklahoma to get where they want to get this season. When you come into a game and you're scoreless until about a little bit over a minute and a half, minute and 45 seconds left, um, and you find yourself behind 3-0 in the game. Just like I said, no energy from the crowd. Of course, they didn't really have a whole lot to be excited about with the lack of offensive production in the first half, and so this is a very familiar territory, a familiar discussion that we're going to have tonight. Really, honestly, guys, in terms of Oklahoma's very slow start in terms of production on the offensive line. Um, just wasn't good across the board. I don't think, I mean, game one you could kind of pinpoint the lack of production to maybe Tyler Guyton, is inexperience and not having Wanye there. To kind of help out from a tackle perspective, but it was across the board bad. Um, Tyler Guyton was bad again tonight. And his inexperience, gives you a little bit of he gets a little bit of reprieve just because it's only his second game and just a young kid. But Anton Harrison again looked like he didn't care half the time, wasn't aggressive, just getting beat constantly. Matauer the same way, just really bad all across the board in the first half. As bad as the offensive line for Oklahoma has played, just generically speaking, in quite some time. Even not quite as maybe even worse than what we saw early in the season last year against Tulane, against West Virginia, just in some of the early season games last year, but really more of the same. I think to a certain degree, you had Kennedy Brooks that masked a little bit of that from time to time. Now they were much better in the second half, but still only running for 134 yards, 3.7 yards per carry. Won't get it done. I was a little bit more optimistic last week, just on the way that Oklahoma ran the ball against UTEP. I think UTEP was even a little bit better up front than what Kent State was. So something that's starting to become a trend. I'm not gonna. It's something that they obviously need to get better at. I'm not ready to say that it's a lost cause and this Oklahoma offensive line is just going to be bad. But it is something that they're going to have to continue to get better in, better at. Like I said, a little bit better in the second half, particularly on the pass blocking side. So you had a lot of things contributing to the lack of productivity in the first half. Not able to run the ball. I think Oklahoma had 7 yards rushing in the first half, combined 7 yards. So when you look at the total, you got 7 yards in the first half, and then you've got I can't remember what I said here, 134. So you have 127 yards in the second half, but still, like I said, better, but not as good as you're going to need to be. As you go into the season, and if you want to win a Big 12 championship, then yeah, have to improve a lot more than that. So don't really put anything bad on the running backs. Eric Gray, 10 carries, 71 yards. Marcus Major did some good things while he was in there as well. 5 carries, 38 yards. Javante Barnes got a little bit more carries early on, there were some questions about whether we thought he would be better, or he would get a little bit more carries and in non garbage time situation, and he got some time and he got some play um, early on in this game. So still making some um, very much freshman mistakes out there, just in terms of um, not seeing the whole field as well as he should be. But yeah, that'll come with time with him. I think the one bright spot on the offensive side of the ball consistently was Marvin Mims, 7 catches, 163 yards, 2 touchdowns. Dylan Gabriel was still pretty good, 21 out of 28, 296, 3 touchdowns, no interception. Still has not thrown an interception, in the first 2 games of the season. So I think he I think he's doing well. I think the one thing that you saw in the first half, he was holding on to the ball a little bit too much. The times that he really kind of gets in trouble is I think he looks for that long ball a little too much from time to time, and will hold the ball a little bit longer than he needs to, rather than just kind of finding that intermediate passing game overall. So offensively, I would probably give them probably a C minus or a D. I think the thing that you're going to see out of this offense early on in the season, at least until they get some consistency on the offensive line, consistency just in the offense in general. I think you're going to see parts. You're going to see phases of this offense that performs incredibly well. Like we saw, the first part of that first quarter against UTEP, 21 points there. What we saw, at the very end of the second quarter, and for the most part throughout the third quarter tonight. But then you're going to have some lulls, and like what happened in the first half, and then what happened a little bit in the second and early parts of the third quarter against UTEP. So I think just working on getting that consistency up a little bit more, and being a little bit better. Then you kind of move over, to the defensive side of the ball. In a game where you only give up 3 points. Again, you look at that as a solid effort. 1 touchdown that's been given up in 2 games. Obviously the competition's not what it will be moving forward, certainly. But then you have to look at that as a positive. You forced 2 turnovers, the interception, which was great to see from Justin Harrington. Late there in the game. And then you've got I think Billy Bowman was excellent. I don't know what he ended up with in terms of tackles. I'm trying to kind of look at the defensive side of the ball while we're talking through some things here. But I know at one point he had double-digit tackles, forced that fumble. So I think right now what you're looking at from this defense is you've got 3 game changers that are playing at a very high level at all 3 levels of the defense. You've got Reggie Grimes that continues to play really well. He's just around the ball, had another sack tonight, was close to a couple more. I think he's playing at a high level. Jalen Redmond's playing at a high level. And then you've got Danny Stutzman that's playing really, really well from a linebacker spot. And then you've got Billy Bowman that's playing well at that safety spot. So, you again, that what they've done over these first 2 games, they've given up some yards, but they've not really given up a lot of points. As I mentioned, the 3 field goals and the 1 touchdown to UTEP. So 16 points in 2 games, 8 points per game right now. I mean, that's solid, but obviously they'll get a much tougher test next week. Those of you that are following it, actually, Nebraska, Georgia Southern, and Nebraska are tied at 35 right now. Looks like Georgia Southern's about to maybe kick a field goal here. They're like 4th and goal. I don't know if they'll go for it or not. 4th and goal at the 1 or 2 yard line. So, like I said, I think Nebraska will provide a much tougher, obviously, challenge on the offensive side of the ball. They're struggling defensively, but They've played decent over these last couple of games on the offensive side of the ball. Put up 35 points here. Um, on Georgia Southern. So, yeah, I mean, I think now the preseason, so to speak, is over with, and now you've got the meat of your, the meat of your schedule. And as we saw today in the Big 12, Kansas beating West Virginia, the Texas, playing much better against Alabama than anyone really gave them credit for, and so the Big 12 is showing itself to be very very competitive, very it's open, very open, and kind of an even conference this year, more so than it's been in the past. I know that Oklahoma State is in a relatively close game right now with Arizona State. They just scored a touchdown. It looks like leading 27-17 over Arizona State with about almost a full fourth quarter remaining. So. Um, like I said, there's some things to build on defensively. I think I think you like what you've seen so far. They only gave up 3 points, and I don't think the tackling was super great tonight. It was much better in game one, but still, you only gave up 3 points to a team that I feel is probably a little bit better, at least on the offensive side of the ball, than what UTEP was a week ago. So I think you're going to see this defense continue to get better and better each week throughout the season and improve. And I think you'll see the same on the offensive side of the ball. So this is not foreign territory for Oklahoma. Oklahoma over the last few years have struggled early in the season, specifically the offensive line, getting that continuity together. So we'll see how that continues to progress. We'll see if Wanye Morris gets back. But I think the one thing, they'll be rode really hard going into this Nebraska game on Saturday. So maybe it's a blessing in disguise that they didn't play extremely well. So because the coaches will be after them when you look at what that looks like. And so there's not a whole lot of depth there. Honestly, you've got Jake Taylor and Jacob Sexton at the tackle position that that might be able to play a little bit, but you don't have as much quality depth there. Savion Byrd played a little bit in the second half, so we'll see what that looks like if there's a little bit of a shakeup on the offensive line. But it wasn't a good performance in any stretch. So certainly would give them a D or a D minus even, at how well they played. From an offensive line perspective. But yeah, like I said, it's something that we've seen from time to time out of the offensive line for Oklahoma early on. And just for whatever reason under Beatonbow, it seems to take them a little bit more time to gel than in the past. I think the one good thing that you have here from Oklahoma's perspective is that you have you have a guy in Jeff Lebby that knows offensive lines. So, he may need to throw his weight in there, so to speak, a little bit on the offensive line, a little bit more. In terms of injuries, there's the only one that only main one I saw was Kelvin Gilliam, late in the game. And I haven't really heard anything on any of the injuries, to be honest with you, early on here. So, it didn't look like it was too major, but we'll see how that goes. And then obviously there was not really much on the offensive side of the ball in terms of injuries that I saw. So, yeah, like I said, a win's a win. You end up winning the game you almost covered. I thought Oklahoma was well on their way to covering the way they played that third quarter, but just kind of ran out of steam on the in the fourth quarter, and just kind of lost a little bit of that with some younger kids coming in and playing and things like that. So 33-3, you've played much better defensively. Overall, tackling is, even though it wasn't as good today, the tackling has been better over the first couple of games this year than certainly what we've seen in the past. I think, when you look at Oklahoma was not good on third downs, really on the offense or the defensive side of the ball. Offensively, you were 3 for 12. Defensively, they were better in the second half, 6 for 16 overall. I believe, if I remember right, I think Kent State was 6 out of 12 at halftime, and so if you held them to 0 for 4 in the second half, so a much better job second half. It just in terms pass defense was even better. I thought they only 11 out of 21 for 131 yards, and no touchdowns, giving up one interception thrown. That was late in the game that Justin Harrington picked off. Um, yeah, a couple of questions here about recruiting. I know they had a couple of big time kids. Jordan Renaud was in this weekend. DJ Hicks was not here. I think I heard some commentary about him being here. He was not here. I believe Peyton Bowen was here. I mean, I think the one good thing, and the question here, Ryan, I wonder how this lackluster performance affects big time recruits that were in Norman tonight. You know what? I think it's just an um, interesting perspective when something like that happens, right? If you're a young kid, do you relish in that a little bit, knowing the fact that I have a chance to come in and impact this team immediately as a true freshman? If you come away from the game thinking it was lackluster, especially at the position that you play, right? But on the other side of it, does it impact? Hey, this team wasn't very good. I think it wasn't very good tonight, at least. The one thing that I think is a big time bonus for Oklahoma, Notre Dame is 0-2, and Texas A&M lost, so that's big for the Peyton Bowen sweepstakes. That really seems to be between Oklahoma, Texas A&M, and Notre Dame. Obviously, he's committed to Notre Dame, but he's been on this flip watch for a couple of months now. Jordan Renaud is still, I think, Bama's up the pressure a little bit on him, but still feel good about him being a Sooner. He's going to announce his commitment on the 19th of September. Those are the two guys that I know that are kind of near and dear. I wasn't able to confirm this, but I heard Ryan Yates might have been in town, but I know that he has recently kind of firmed up his commitment to LSU. But who knows with him, things not necessarily going well at LSU, particularly last week. So yeah, I think it's hard to tell, Ryan, in terms of what that looks like. But this staff is recruiting at a high level, and I think this team is going to get better as the season goes on. Now, whether this team is good enough to win a Big 12 championship certainly remains to be seen. But I think, like I said, at the very least, this team will continue to get better and better as the season goes on. For Oklahoma. But I think the one thing that you have to consider with the Big 12 schedule is that this conference is it's more even than it's ever been. I think, at least has been in a long time. I mean, you got a big one tonight with BYU and Baylor. Let's see how Baylor plays on the road. But as I mentioned, Texas, the Big 12. Let me just go to the scoreboard here for the Big 12, just in general. Um, so Texas played about as well as you would have hoped. In that 2019 loss to Alabama, probably should have won the game. All things considered. Um, Oklahoma State still up 27-17 over Arizona State with the ball. Then you've got Texas Tech winning their game in double overtime, 33-30. Kansas State, 40-12 over Missouri. You've got Iowa State, 10-7 over Iowa, and then certainly Kansas in that 55-42 victory over West Virginia. And so, like I said, it's as even as it's been in the past. And I think most people in the conference have traditionally had Kansas as almost like an automatic win, and it kind of looked that way early on. West Virginia got up to a 14-0 lead, 21-7, and then Kansas was just played extremely well late, kind of mid second quarter on throughout the rest of the game. So Um, so it's interesting. And I think from a recruiting perspective, next week is another big one. Obviously for Oklahoma for Malachi Nelson. I'm sorry, Malachi Coleman. That's really between Oklahoma and Nebraska, and I think he's coming in for a visit mid-Octoberish. Um, I think I saw that the other day. Um, so it'll be interesting to see um, how this recruiting class continues to end up. But I think Bowen will flip. I think Raynaud is in a good spot, and I think OU is in a really really good spot right now. It might take some time. Who knows when this announcement's going to end up being? But I think OU's in a really good spot for DJ Hicks. Again, Texas A&M losing was really profitable for Oklahoma in that fashion. So and I think that's one of the things that you look at, where this team has some holes, on both defensive lines. I think you're not quite as dynamic as you would like to be. I think you've got some good solid players, right? But I don't think you've got any game changers, at least especially in the middle of that line. Jeffrey Johnson's a nice player. Isaiah Coe's a nice player. Um, Jordan Kelly's a nice player, but you don't have anyone as good as a DJ Hicks right now. That kid's going to be an instant impact player, day one starter wherever he goes. If he's in Oklahoma, he'll be on that starting defensive line next year without a doubt. So, but like I said, like there's some holes on this, particularly on the offensive line, where they've got to shore some of this up. And so, there was a comment here about, is it time to look for a new offensive line coach? I don't think that's Beatonbow's regarded as one of the best in the country. No matter what, I think some of the shine is off the diamond, so to speak, over how they performed over the last few years. Whether you want to chalk that up to recruiting, whether you want to chalk that up to the previous staff strength and conditioning situation, whether you want to chalk that up just to the scheme that Oklahoma has ran in the past. So I think one of the things that'll be interesting going into next week, much you'll see much fewer substitutions for Oklahoma. Particularly on the defensive side of the ball, which against UTEP you saw them running two and three third teamers in there early and often. You probably won't have them play quite as much as they obviously played in the past. But I think it is certainly um, the a situation where that bench will shorten on both sides of the ball. But they got to get those five guys on the offensive line that can coexist and play really well together as a team. And it may be a struggle early on. It kind of took off at Texas against Texas last year on how well they played. As an offensive line, and then they started to get a little bit better as the season went on. Not great by any stretch of the imagination, but a little bit better. So yeah, we'll see a lot of room for improvement, a lot of opportunity. Looks like Nebraska just got an interception on their own goal line there to stop the Georgia Southern drive. But yeah, if they get Wanye back this week, we'll see what that looks like from a cohesion perspective. But again, everybody's got to step up and play a lot better, without a doubt. As you look and you move forward. In the season to get exactly where you want to be if you're an Oklahoma fan, as most of us are, and want to see them fight for that opportunity to win a Big 12 championship. So, all right. So bring any questions, comments, whether it's recruiting, whether it's just offensive line, defensively, whatever you want to talk about, for the next 15, 20 minutes, and we'll continue to talk through where Oklahoma's at, nationally on the national scene this year. If you guys have any questions, just overall, obviously, one of the stories of the day was There's quite a few upsets. Overall, Alabama just missed. Just missed that upset. You've got Texas A&M losing at home to Appalachian State, 17-14, and just they've got just a really bad quarterback situation with maybe see Max Johnson um, come in next week. You've got Marshall with a 26-21 win over Notre Dame. Again, kind of consistently struggling on the offensive line, struggling offensively there. In a mild upset, Kentucky beat Florida 26-16. After Florida got that big win over Utah, last weekend. Um, then you've got Tennessee beating Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh, another mild upset, not anything that's just super earth shattering, but a mild upset. Washington State beating Wisconsin 17-14. And then this isn't really an upset, just from a ranking perspective, it is, but Texas Tech beating Houston 33-30. Again, a really good day for the Big 12 overall in general. So we'll see how that continues to go through the season. It looks like it could be a season with a lot of upsets. Who would have thought through 2 weeks you've got Kansas at 2-0, and then you've got Notre Dame at 0-2. So I think it remains to be seen how the rest of the season will go. I think last week nationally you looked at how well Alabama played against Utah State, won that game, and in very, very dominating fashion, and just did not look as good. Wide receivers, aren't as good as they were a year ago. Offensive line, and maybe not as many game changers at the running back position. So I think it's going to be week to week. Who looks the best, who looks okay. And then you've got Oklahoma that's probably going to, I would guess, depending on. Well, I don't think there's really any other games that might depend on this, but Oklahoma probably jumps up a spot to number 6 in the AP poll with, Texas A&M losing today. So you're all things considered, you're still the number 6 team in the country, even though it was a little bit more of a lackluster performance. So the lightest Bama D lineman weighs 290. Our heaviest. And I think one of those things, Oki, is just seeing that it's only been one off season for Schmidt. It takes some time, and they don't have the players that Alabama does. When you look at Alabama, when you look at Georgia, when you look at Ohio State, maybe even Michigan to a certain degree, and some of these other ones, Oklahoma just doesn't have the same guys up front on both sides of the ball. I mean, I think they'll get there. I think the recruiting is going to be dynamic at the spots that maybe it hasn't necessarily always been dynamic. But I think I think it will get there. But they don't, particularly on the offensive line, they don't have the guys that are, the Alabamas, the Georgias, the Ohio States, the guys that kind of stick out to you as good. As really just great players. Question in for Carva: should Texas be ranked after losing? I mean, normally I would say no, but the way that they played, I would say yeah. They probably should be in the bottom half of that top 25. I think they earned a lot of. I'm not someone that's really into moral victories too much, but I think they give themselves a lot of confidence in the way they played today, going into the rest of the season. Obviously, with that, certainly with that game that they probably felt like they should have won. If Ewers was in there for the entire game, or if Hudson Card was healthy, they may have won that game. And then as it is, they just couldn't get a stop there late in the game. If they tackle Bryce Young on that cornerback blitz there late in the game, they may have put themselves in a position to win that game. But I don't know if they were going to be able to stop Alabama, regardless of what happened there. They're late, but they've got to be fan base, and the team's got to be thrilled with the way they performed in that game. So yeah, I would anticipate them being ranked this week. Would not be shocked if Alabama dropped to 2 and Georgia jumped to one. I mean, even though Georgia just they only played Samford, so you can't really do anything with that one way or the other. I think it was a 33 to nothing win, if I remember right. So nothing too you know nothing too great one way or the other. It looks like Nebraska just fumbled. They were driving a little bit. It looks like they just fumbled, and Georgia Southern recovered. 6:23 remaining. We'll see. I have to look at the replay to see if that will be upheld. But yeah, Nebraska really struggling. So I think when you look ahead to Nebraska, I think will be a much bigger challenge um, for Oklahoma. Sorry, let's see. They're showing the replay here. I think he's probably that's close. He might be down. Looks like he's possibly down there. But yeah, I think Nebraska poses a lot stiffer challenge, at least from an offensive perspective. Casey Thompson, still a very good quarterback, I think. Anthony Grant, I believe is his name, the running back from Nebraska, pretty good running back. Kind of more of a bulldozing guy. So it's going to stress the defense a little bit more. I think there's some familiarity with what Nebraska runs with. With Venable Scene. The offensive coordinator's name is escaping me, but he used to be at Miami, so a little bit familiarity with what they run, and um, so I think that'll be. I think offensively, Oklahoma has a good opportunity to get some consistency with a defense that's not it's not incredibly strong. And so I'm just looking at this replay. It looks like he's down. I don't know. They haven't made, but just looking at the replays, I would be surprised if this ball doesn't come back to Nebraska. But yeah, I think that Oklahoma will have an opportunity if they can get some consistency on the offensive line to play better. But it's a lot. I mean, it's different. First, under a new staff, a very new head coach, new staff, first road game of the season. What does that look like from a I know that they'll be prepared and ready, obviously, but you never know how your team's going to react in a hostile environment, first road game of the season. Regardless of whether Nebraska holds on to win this game or not. So, 11 a.m. kickoff, which should probably help Oklahoma, I think, from a crowd noise perspective. I mean, certainly all those fans getting riled up. It doesn't happen as much. So yeah, and that call was reversed. Nebraska. It looks like they're going to hold on to the ball. And so yeah, you don't have probably as great of an atmosphere, but heck, Texas had an outstanding atmosphere today for an 11 a.m. kickoff. So the fans will be jacked up in Lincoln for Oklahoma coming to town. So so I'm going to preface this, Jimmy, in saying that I don't know that just Morris coming back will fix what's going on right now. I think they're struggling across the board. Yes, tackle's not playing well certainly with Tyler Guyton there. I think you've got obviously a better player in Wanye Morris without a doubt. Don't disagree with that at all. But you still got some issues inside with Matauer. Um, you know, and then you've got some limitations with Murray that we know are there just in his short arms and stuff like that. And so we'll see how that goes. Yeah, they don't have the guys that they need to compete for a national championship right now on either side of the ball. I think they're closer on the defensive side than they are offensive line, but they have guys that can win the Big 12 without a doubt. But I don't think that they have guys that can compete for a national championship just yet. The offense looks like just like Lincoln's, and the defense is the same, equal of last year. Pushing it just a pinch better. Um, Brian, I don't necessarily agree. I think that the offense is much different looking than Lincoln's offense. A lot of inside zone running as opposed to, um, you know, sport as opposed to that guard tackle over that they pull and play that they run a lot in that scheme that Riley runs. So Oklahoma Levy believes in running the ball lot more, so play it and they play a lot faster. So I don't think it's very similar at all. And I see a lot of difference on the defensive side of the ball. I'll go so far to say they're quite a bit better um, than they were a year ago. But let's see how it goes with Nebraska, their first, their biggest test of the season thus far, and we'll see what happens there. So um, yeah, crowd noise was bad in the first half. I mean, it's kind of hard from a crowd noise perspective when you don't really have a ton to kind of get excited for, but that's Oklahoma's fan base, at least in the stadium. From I had season tickets for years and years, and it's always the same for the most part. You have some differences and things like that that will happen in games that are um, in games that are not super hyped up, not super competitive, at least coming into the game. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's an issue. It's been an issue for quite some time, but it continues to be an issue. So we'll see how that continues to go. But yeah, I don't think Oklahoma fans traditionally get up for the big games, but the other ones, it's not quite what it needs to be. Um, Ryan, I think this was the one concerning thing. I think I think the effort was there, but just their interest in the game, which I've heard a lot of coaches say before. Typically, for like a 12-game season, you're going to be really up and excited and just at your peak performance level, ready to go in like 8 out of 12 games. Like you're just not going to be up for every single game. You take teams lightly. It happens. I coach basketball. I coach high school basketball. Just a story about that. A team that we played first round in the playoffs this past year, we played in the regular season. We beat them by almost 40. So as much as I did to try to get them ready and knowing that, hey, every game's different, they're going to be ready to play. It's the playoffs. It's a different mentality. We came out and didn't play very well in the first half. And I think a lot of them just took it for granted. So a lot of these kids these days, I think they just walk in and think, oh, this is Kent State, or oh, this is UTEP, or whoever it is, or Kansas, or whoever in the past that you'd have um, on your schedule, and just feel like that they could walk in and win. And it happens. Hopefully these things continue to happen less and less. But I think it did happen, and I think mostly on the offensive side of the ball. I didn't really see much on defense, but in terms of I think they were flying around the ball. Had some missed tackles, obviously, um, but I think that will happen from time to time. Really, just kind of changing that culture. They've been a bad tackling team for the last however many years, and they just are continue to are trying to grow from that, and they're not necessarily where they need to be just yet. So yeah, so anticipate that getting better, and then just them improving overall as a team um, each and every game. So well, I thank everybody for joining tonight. It's right at about 10, so we've been on here almost an hour. So we will. Don't forget to come follow me at Jason Ray One. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button, and we'll talk about everything that's going on from a college football perspective, and specifically Oklahoma. Um, and we'll continue to one of the biggest games. I think, as I talked a lot during preseason, this is, one of the biggest this is the biggest game of the season. You have very much coach speak that the biggest game of the season is always going to be your next game. But when you look at this Nebraska game, um, this could make this game go I mean, this season go one of two ways. If you win this game and you win it in fairly convincing fashion, it can springboard your season into the Big 12. And you've got TCU and Kansas State leading up to Texas. You lose this first game, this game against Nebraska, and then it could hopefully you don't want to see this, but it could snowball or anything like that. So very will be very interesting. I would think Oklahoma will probably be a small favorite, going into this game. Maybe a 2 or 3 point favorite. Just maybe a little bit more than that, with depending on what happens here. With Nebraska, they've kind of struggled in each game thus far. So we'll see how that continues to go. But really excited for the first big game of the season. We'll be talking about it. We'll probably have someone on the Nebraska side come talk about where Nebraska is, and and then moving forward, look at some of the keys that we'll have in this game. So thanks everybody for joining this evening. Hope you guys have an excellent rest of your weekend. God bless, and Boomer Sooner.